Blessings, beloveds. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer, going to talk about Neptune conjunct the Ascendant. So this is transiting Neptune conjunct the Ascendant. However, if you have natal Neptune conjunct your Ascendant when you were born, some of these themes and characteristics you'll probably relate to anyway as some kind of lifelong theme in certain ways. Okay, the first thing that I want to say is there is some drilling going on in this building, and I'm hoping that it's going to stay paused for a while. So if it comes through and it's really bad, I'll pause. I'll see how I go. So I apologize for that. It's disrupted my work the last 48 hours. I haven't been able to do my work effectively, and it's been very frustrating. But such is life. We just have to deal with the curveballs, however big or small they may be. So what I think is really, really important to remind you guys, and for those of you that are new to my channel and don't know how I work or are not working with astrology professionally yourselves, then this is something that you need to understand. And that is that when we are talking about the ascendant, your rising sign, the ascendant is 100% based on the accuracy of your time of birth. And I just want to remind you guys that if you have a hospital time, that's wonderful, but it doesn't mean it's correct, okay? And it frequently isn't. And there's numerous reasons for that. And just to quickly remind you of what they may be, you were born, the nurse at the time, well, the doctor instructs the nurse to write the time down that you were born. That could have been 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes after your birth. It doesn't necessarily mean that a hospital time is dead accurate. It frequently isn't. So just please keep that in mind. So the ascendant, in order to have a look at transits in your birth chart, going over any of the 4 angles actually, the angles, okay, are determined through your precise time of birth. So when you have a planet going over the ascendant or over the MC or the bottom part of your chart, the IC, or the descendant, the right-hand side of the chart, so the cross of matter, which draws up that 360 degrees circle, those 4 points are the most powerful points in the chart, and they are completely time dependent. So if your time was incorrect by 5-10 minutes, then a transit from an outer planet such as Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto could be incorrect timing-wise by a few years. You might think you've got Neptune on your ascendant now, and if your time is incorrect, either it needs to be rectified to go back or to go forward. If it's to go back, then you would have had this Neptune transit a few years ago. If your time moves forward, you're yet to have this transit. If you have an accurate time, then you're having the transit now. That's not something that's easy for you to determine, especially if you're not a professional astrologer and someone who knows how to rectify times of birth, which is something I do, okay? So just a reminder, if you really want to know your time of birth, I suggest you find somebody to help you rectify it. Now, one other thing you can do though, as an exploration yourself, is if you think you've got transiting Neptune on the ascendant currently, then what I'm about to describe about transiting Neptune on the ascendant will resonate with you, okay, to some degree. Now, don't forget with transiting Neptune, and this is the case with the other outer planets as well, it usually has what we call 3 hits. So the transit will go for 12 months or 18 months, sometimes a bit longer. And in that period, Neptune hits your ascendant, for example. It comes onto your ascendant, so it's come out of the 12th house onto your ascendant, okay? And as it starts that cycle of forming a conjunction to your ascendant, it's going to at some point go retrograde, then it's going to come back hit the ascendant again. That's the second hit. It's going to go retrograde again down the track, and it's going to come back to your ascendant again. And there's the third hit. So it's a triple transit. And it's usually those months where it does that movement of going back and then coming back again over the ascendant. Those months are very, very crucial. Something begins at the first hit, something progresses towards in the second hit, and then in the last hit, it's the closure, the ending of that transit, as it were. But you've got the energy active for the whole duration, whether it's 12 months or 18 months. So time of birth is crucial. Now, if you think you've got Neptune on your ascendant now, you will know if your time of birth is close to accurate or accurate, because you can test this with any of the outer planets, specifically the outer planets, including Saturn, of course, going over the ascendant, the descendant, the MC, the IC, top part of the chart, bottom part of the chart. And if the description of that planet going over the ascendant, let's just stick to the ascendant, doesn't fit with you in your life to some extent, then you know your time of birth is wrong if it doesn't fit at this point in time. Okay, so this is just a really good way to test whether you even have an accurate time of birth. Admittedly, with Neptune, the only thing that's clear is that everything is unclear. So it can be very difficult to work out, even if you do have a right or wrong time, because Neptune is such that it distorts reality, it distorts truth, it dissolves boundaries, it dissolves the ego boundaries. Neptune is without question one of the more difficult transits. Here's some considerations to have a think about. So the book I'm reading out of is this one, Planets in Transit by Rob Hand. Okay, this is an old book, but there's some really good material in this. I would add more, just based on my own journey and understanding and observations through the years, but certainly what Rob produces in this book is really good. It is relatively or predominantly psychologically based. It's not, it doesn't focus on things like past lives and sort of spiritual dimensions necessarily. It's very, very personality psychologically based, the interpretation that is, but incredibly valid, because we are psychological beings. We have a personality, we have a psychology about us, and we have all these other dimensions as well. But just letting you know that this is a more of a psychological interpretation. So in his words, he says, Neptune is usually one of the most difficult planetary influences to handle. It causes life to become confusing and unclear, and under its influence, people often believe what is not true. At the same time, Neptune often has an ego-denying influence, which may make you feel discouraged, futile, undeserving, and unworthy. We haven't heard anything great so far, have we? Or it can lead you to perform great acts of selflessness and self-martyrdom. So great acts of selflessness are a good thing, provided you're not becoming, a victim or a martyr or a savior, which is a strong signature for the frequency of Neptune. It draws out in us the most empathetic, sensitive, compassionate components of our nature and our being, even if we're not normally operating in that way, because we're just we have a lot of fire or a lot of air in our chart, and we're not usually the sensitive type, as it were, or they're extremely empathetic type. Well, this energy is going to change that, particularly over the ascendant, because the ascendant point is how you experience the energies around you. It's how you look through the filters of your eyes and perceive your environment and perceive your reality. So it is a direct influence on your personal self. Ascendant, soul. In esoteric astrology, the ascendant is a soul. The ascendant correlates to how we perceive what we are looking at. It's how we project components of our being. The first house, which is part of the ascendant, is literally the physical body. So we're talking about a very personal experience with Neptune on the ascendant that we embody, right? So when a planet is moving through the first house, we basically become that energy to some capacity. We embody that vibration in a way that we're not even aware of, especially with Neptune. With Pluto and Uranus, it's different. It's a different embodiment in terms of the ability to see that more clearly. But with Neptune, like I said, the only thing that's clear is that nothing is clear. So think about your physical body embodying the frequency of Neptune, which is a highly, highly, highly heightened sensitivity. Okay, so if you have Mars in the first house natally, then your physicality is a very you have a strong stamina, most likely. You're a warrior type of character figure. You sort of triumph through life. You're a fighter. You know, you fight for the underdog. You fight for yourself. It's a real warrior signature archetype. Mars in the first house, and it's an energy that can repel people as well. It can push people away because Mars pushes. It's a masculine energy, right? So imagine having transiting Neptune going through the first house. Neptune is the frequency that ultimately is the divine source creation for all things. It's a frequency that to a large extent has nothing in common with this third dimensional space and sphere that we inhabit. So when we try to filter that energy through our being, our body, it can, at the personality level, be projected and filtered through the glamorous, idealistic component to Neptune. So the world of glamour is ruled by Neptune. So TV, Hollywood, movie stars, things like that, that's totally Neptune. Let me just read a few more comments by Robbie. Okay, Neptune can also expose yet to some extremely beautiful and ideal influences, which may not always be real, but are worthwhile because of their beauty. So with Neptune, we are drawn to the softness, the idealistic, the blissful, the beautiful, the ecstasy components of our being, of life, and what we want to connect with. It's like being intoxicated with love. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that at all. But the problem becomes when we project that onto the truth and the reality of what exists around us, which just does not match that ideal of what Neptune wants or is projecting. The difficulty of the planet's influence arises from the fact that Neptune dissolves whatever Saturn builds. Saturn is your conscious structure of reality. It's how you perceive reality, what you've consciously constructed in your world. That's Saturn. Neptune comes along, boom, it just dissolves all those structures and boundaries and barriers and so forth. And he says here, such as your ego. So it dissolves your ego boundaries. And that's one of the biggest challenges when you have Neptune going over the ascendant. Ego boundaries are very important because they act as protective defense mechanisms that we need to protect us in this world. If we had no ego boundaries, we wouldn't be able to distinguish, for a start, that this is me in my body and that's you over there in your body. There'd be no boundaries. So we'd just be merging and blending into each other, which is what happens in the spirit world, where it's where oneness is. But in the physicality, we must have these boundaries in play. And Neptune dissolves those boundaries, which is what makes it quite a challenging transit when it's in the first house, because it brings in it can bring in a lot of confusion, even about who you think you are and who you feel you are at that time. And others around you, um, others around you are relating to a component of you that's sort of coming through at the moment, but you yourself are not even sure what that is. It's a really, really, really tricky energy. There's a lot of layers to it, but this is an introduction just to give you guys some tips. Okay, so Neptune works against all these structures. It dissolves or threatens to dissolve your ego. So that initially you feel lost, confused, or defeated. Now, I just want to make a point here. It doesn't matter, well, it does, but in the case of Neptune transiting the Ascendant, the first house, this is not about testing how spiritual you are, how awake you are, how conscious you are, how individuated you are. You can be quite evolved, quite aware, quite awake, and Neptune can still get you. You can still have these experiences. So it's not a test of how awake or conscious you are. This is an important point, because one of my best friends who's got Neptune over the Ascendant at the moment, who is one of the most evolved, individuated, conscious, awake, aware people that I've known in my life, other than one other person, and he's 71 or 72, and he's got Neptune over his Ascendant. He's had it there for the last 18 months, and I'll give you a few details of what his experience has been. And I'm specifically bringing this example in because it's somebody I know in my personal life. It's not something I'm reading out of a book. I've been part of this journey with him, so I've seen it play out as well. Okay, and this is how you learn astrology. You've got to observe. You've got to draw the correlations by making real life observations with these archetypes and these energies, right? Okay. This transit, however, can also bring about a sense of feeling exhilarated and at one with the entire universe. So it has a real, it's the most trickiest energy to handle, because you can wake up one day feeling so inspired with these beautiful, divine ideas and feelings and compassion and empathy and inspiration of how you're going to help heal the world, and things like that. And you feel really compelled and drawn to being part of that process, and actively wanting to do something with this energy. And it could just be that you focus on helping somebody in your life. Maybe you're taking care of a parent at this time who's dying. Maybe you're taking care of somebody who's really sick. Maybe you're just helping out a friend who's going through a really hard time, and just your ability at this time to be so compassionate and empathetic is exactly what this person needs. So there's this call to want to kind of help, and helping is okay as long as boundaries are in place. But the problem is that Neptune dissolves boundaries. And this is where issues come in, which I'll unpack in a moment. Neptune can dissolve your sense of reality, leaving you prey to confusion and doubt. Vague, unreasoning fears can result from a Neptune transit, especially if Saturn is involved. Neptune can destroy your sense of responsibility, make you feel that others should take care of you. So it's like you become the victim, right? Neptune brings up the martyr, the victim, and the savior, as does Pisces. Yet at the same time, because of its ego-denying effect, you feel responsible for all the sins of the world. What a heavy burden to carry that would be. This energy makes some people spend their lives in social service, trying to make the world better, without any thought of personal advancement. Sacrifice, Neptune. As Neptune transits each house, watch the affairs ruled by that house, etc., etc., etc. So I've got two examples, and I'm not going to bring up these individuals' charts because I just want to keep those levels private and confidential, but the one person is, as I said, a person who's 72, who I've known for 25 years. He's actually my mentor and astrology teacher. I've made reference to him numerous times because he's a very important figure in my life. And the last 18 months, he's had Neptune on the ascendant. So he's got Pisces ascendant. So for those of you who have Pisces rising, 19, 20, 21 degrees, you'll have Neptune on there at the moment. It needs to be tied into more specific timing than that, but I'm just giving a rounded sort of general figure at the moment. So he, believe it or not, this individual has had fairly extensive health matters throughout his life that he's had to deal with, which correlate to a lot of past life material, a lot of spiritual resolution of things going on, but working through the body. However, even though that's been a big part of his journey, he'd never been to a hospital. Never, ever, ever been to a hospital for anything at the age of 72. It's pretty remarkable, actually, given the health issues that he had as well. He was also a naturopath, so he works holistically, and he's really like a doctor, actually, better than probably better than most GPs, actually. He's just got extensive knowledge, understanding, insight, because he researches and has been for many years, and he's very thorough. He's a seventh race soul, so he's very good at extracting information, details, timing, things like that. Seventh race soul esoterically. So he goes into hospital, first time in his life ever, when Neptune hits the ascendant. He has 2 general anesthetics whilst in hospital. The general anesthesia anesthetics are ruled by Neptune. The 12th house, Pisces, Neptune, all correlate to hospital, drugs, altered states of consciousness. The times that he had 2 general anesthetics were the exact timing of when Neptune was exactly on the ascendant. So the first time Neptune hit the ascendant, in hospital, general anesthetic for a particular procedure. Neptune goes retrograde, comes back a few months later because he had a couple of visits into hospital. Second time Neptune hits the ascendant, back in hospital, another general anesthetic for another procedure. So this is a literal manifestation of Neptune on the ascendant. Remember, the ascendant is the physical body. So it is speaking to what your physical body is experiencing, what it's going to bring up for you. The 6th house is what we do around health, mind-body connection or disconnection. It connects to central nervous system, all sorts of inner systems in our body. But the 1st house is the entire physical body. So it's what we absorb, what we project, and what we encounter, experience physically. So in other words, the 18 months where this individual has had Neptune on the ascendant, he's basically just had to deal with going to hospital, having general anesthetics, and dealing with some procedures that took him into altered states of consciousness, which is Neptune. It's been one of the more difficult periods in his life because aside from the physical health matters that have come up, which has worked out fine for him, it's actually helped him resolve some things. So it's been good, but it was very difficult whilst going through it. Because of course, being in hospital it's never pleasant, it's never easy. You're there because you're unwell in some kind of way, right? Then there was the component of which is still quite present for him because Neptune is still on the ascendant, but by the end of this year it'll move away from his ascendant further into the 1st house. So this is another important point. The intensity of an energy, a planet crossing over an angle in the chart, in this case the ascendant, it's the transit for the first 18 months or so that's the entrance of the energy, and that's the intensity of when it's felt very, very strongly. And literally, you can see it manifesting in the life with very specific circumstances, such as what I've just described with this person. And then as it drops, past the ascendant and then starts to go more into the first house, because remember, Neptune spends 14 years in one house. 14 years. It's a long transit. It's not, a few months, a few weeks. It's a long, long transit. But the initial entrance over the angle is where we feel, embody, start to assimilate and integrate that energy into our being. And as it starts to go further into the first house, then it brings about other sorts of experiences. Okay. So the level of sensitivity, hypersensitivity, and empathy when Neptune is on the ascendant is really extreme. It's a feeling of tuning into the suffering of everybody, the suffering of the world, everybody's woes and hurts and pains and sufferings. You're just like this psychic sponge that's just feeling it all as if it's your own, and it's not. So let me just see that point that I've made there. Yeah, overly affected by tragedy during a time when Neptune's on the ascendant. Now, tragedy is projected in social media, TV, all those platforms all the time, isn't it? Because negativity sells, fear sells, believe it or not. So there's a lot of focus on, the tragic and the hardships and things like that gets people's attention. So if you've got Neptune on your ascendant, it's very difficult to discriminate what you're allowing into your physical bounds around you, and therefore how it then just infiltrates into your being. You absorb it like a sponge, just take it all in. So because Neptune is the opposite to discrimination, when Neptune's on the ascendant, you can't discriminate what's real, what's false, what's fantasy, what's illusion, what's ideal. And you're just kind of taking it all in. And when you do that, you are inviting, without wanting to, you're inviting thoughts, feelings, energy, spiritually, emotionally, physically, relationships you're having with people, conversations you're having with people. You're inviting things into your sphere of existence, things that otherwise you perhaps wouldn't, and things that at a time when you are super sensitive, you're not able to manage because of the level of sensitivity that's there. So when you have Neptune on the ascendant, because the very difficult thing to do is to discriminate, which is the very thing you need to do, you really need to discriminate what you're going to allow into your field of experience. Now, let me break that down in a practical way. Who are you chatting with every day? Who are you hanging out with? Who are you allowing to dump their stuff on you? Because it's one thing to share a space, facilitate a space, give. That's one thing. And then it's another thing to just dump your shit on people. And that happens a lot. So when you are Neptuned out by Neptune on the ascendant, you can't work these things out because your level of sensitivity is bigger than identifying the reality of what's going on. So you just get sucked into people's pain and sorrows, and you want to help them and save them. And no one can save anyone. We can only save ourselves by becoming conscious and evolving. So when you have Neptune on the Ascendant, my recommendation would be very very discriminative about what you allow into your life at this time in terms of relationships, connecting, engaging, and sharing. The spaces that you enter. So here's another example. I know somebody else, when they had Neptune on the Ascendant, this is a personal person in my life, and I was there with this person, and they went through this. This person had some mental health issues at that time when Neptune came over the Ascendant. It was a horrific time, actually, quite traumatic. I took this person to a naturopath who uses something that's called a Vega machine, which is an electroacupuncture machine, and it's highly controversial. There's a lot of, obviously, conventional medicine doesn't agree with it, says it's nonsense and it's inaccurate and so on and so forth. And each to their own. But this machine, it has the ability, I don't understand the full extent of it, but my understanding is that it has the ability to detect energetically imbalances and things that are going on with the body, but also spiritually as well. Because what had happened was this person who had Neptune on the Ascendant, when we went to this naturopath, this was years ago, this was about 20 years ago. Yeah, about 20 years ago, almost. The Vega machine was able to detect from a spiritual level some energies and forces that were attacking this particular individual. Now, I don't want to scare you. It's not about that. But it is about understanding that the spiritual realm, that's a conversation that would take lifetimes. But the spiritual dimensions too have, in certain spiritual layers, there are forces, entities, frequencies that are dark. And they tend to prey on vulnerable people, people who have mental health issues, people who ingest a lot of drugs and alcohol and things like that, environments that have a dense dark sort of energy. These entities love that field or those people because they take energy from these sorts of people, right? It's pretty complex, but hopefully you can relate to what I'm saying to some extent. So basically, spiritually, this person was being attacked. Why? Because at that time, Neptune on the Ascendant, it opened this individual up so much that psychic attack was coming in. And it was creating disturbance in the mind relative to the perception that the individual had at the time. Now, this example especially is really extreme, right? And I'm not saying that this is going to happen to anyone who has transiting Neptune on the Ascendant. Of course, that's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that it is possible, and it does happen, and it has happened. I've seen it. I've witnessed it firsthand. And the reason I've used this example is because this might reach somebody that needs to hear this right now, needs to understand this for some reason. In addition to that, I'm sharing it because it's an incredibly undeniable, powerful example of what can come up with Neptune on the Ascendant. So hanging around with negative people is going to drain you more than ever when you've got Neptune on the Ascendant. toxic, negative relationships. Uh, again, it's going to drain you, wipe you out. Your ability to be discerning, discriminative, and clear about the truth of things is heavily compromised when Neptune's on the ascendant. So you have to put in extra protection for yourself. You have to do that. No one's going to do that for you. You have to be proactive about it. You know, you have to make the right choices and decisions that are conducive to you being protected as much as you can be with the very little boundaries that are in place during this time, especially when Neptune's on the ascendant. So um, even spiritually, there can be, as I said, there can be energies and frequencies that can attach to you at this time as well. It just depends on a number of other things that are, going on, really. But these are some of the things to consider. Just to finish this up, because I need to go, and because the building has stopped and I've got a reading to do, and I want to do that as soon as I stop talking here. From a artistic level, this can be a wonderful time to feel inspired creatively and artistically. It's kind of like it's like spirit is just pouring through you, and which that in itself is healing and beautiful, but you've got to be the right sort of shape, the right conduit for it to find space or form inside you to create from a place that is of inspiration and love. Because remember, Neptune is inspiration and love. It's Neptune is the pure unconditional love. Venus is more conditioned love to an extent. It's the lower octave of Neptune. Neptune is the highest form of love. And as humans, we're all fractured in different ways. We can't embody that Neptune to the extent that divine source does, because that is divine source coming through us. So we can take components of that and assimilate it into our being consciously to try and produce from that space of the highest form of love. And that can come through our artistry, whatever our artistry may be, because artistry is a huge umbrella with lots of different components to artistic expression. But the artistic expression that can come forth at this time is divinely inspired. It's Neptune, divinely inspired. So that's on a positive level, that's some of what Neptune can bring out as well. Yeah, so I'll leave it there, and hopefully that gives you guys some key points, some understanding, some clarity. Pop your questions below if you have them, or your comments, and I'll respond to them as best as I can, as I always try to do. And I know there'll be lots of you out there thinking, well, I have it conjunct my moon, and I have it conjunct my sun, and I have it conjunct my Venus. I'm going to have Neptune on my Venus soon. Yeah, so that's going to be an awesome, awesome time in a lot of ways. So anyway, look, I'll try I'll try to continue this series of Neptune, let this be. There is a video I've done on, I think it's natal Neptune on the Ascendant. I think I did that a couple of years ago. So if you've got natal Neptune in your chart on your Ascendant, it's worth watching that video, because I've offered different material in that video. Maybe I'll pop a link below. Yeah, I'll do that. And yeah, and I'll just try and continue this, with transiting Neptune, conjunct the moon, conjunct the sun, the interpersonal planets, because there'll be loads of you that will be having that experience. Yeah, okay. So much love, lots of blessings, and I'll see you soon with some June updates actually, and somewhere in between some further Neptune work as well. Yeah, okay. Bye guys. Take care. Thanks for watching.